Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside Archaeology. If you're new here, my name is Rachel. I'm an archaeologist, and a while ago, we're not going to dwell on how long, I spent 3 summers digging in the Kingdom of Jordan, during which time I visited the famous site of Petra 4 times. Carved into the rose-red cliffs by the Nabataeans over 2,000 years ago, Petra is a marvel of ancient engineering, culture, and mystery. Many people only know about it because of one particular movie scene, but it is so much more than the resting place of the Holy Grail. It has temples, tombs, and thousands of stairs taking you to breathtaking viewpoints. Today, I'm going to take you on an archaeological tour of Petra based on my own visits there, giving you historical insights that might be missed on a regular tour, as well as some tips and tricks for how to make the most out of any future trip you might want to go on there. Almost all of the images you'll see today are my own, but since they're from around 15 years ago, they're not always the best quality, so I've supplemented with a few stock images here and there. This is the final video in my wider series, The Builders of Petra. In the first 2 videos, I covered the history and cultures of the Nabataean people who built Petra. Make sure you watch these first so that you can fully understand and appreciate some of the things I'm going to speak about today. You can find those 2 other videos either up here or in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to learn more about real-life archaeology and its discoveries. If you like this video, please take a moment to hit like or share it. If you want to go further and actively support me, all super thanks or Ko-fi donations and Redbubble sales go back into improving and promoting the content that you see here. All right, everyone, let's dig in. I want to start today with a brief historical and geographical overview of the site. Geographically speaking, Petra is located in the basin valley of Wadi Musa, which is Arabic for the Valley of Moses, and it is surrounded by the mountains. As you may have noticed from the valley's name, there are several mythical stories which associate the site to the biblical events of Exodus, none of which are supported by evidence from the archaeological record. While not historically correct in any way, these stories remain an entertaining part of the folklore of Petra. The area around the site has been inhabited as early as 7000 BCE, so that's like 9,000 years. In the Iron Age, it was occupied by the Edomites and already a stopping ground for merchants. Archaeological work has found evidence of Nabataean presence here dating back to the 2nd century BCE, by which time Petra had become their capital. Although, did you know that they didn't call it that? Petra was originally called something that sounds like Rockmu or Rakemo by its inhabitants. The name that we currently use is the Greek word for rock. So imaginative, those Greeks. Petra's heyday was around what I kind of think of in my head as the turn of the first millennium. At this time, during the Hellenistic and Roman periods, it was a major caravan stop for the incense of Arabia, the silks of China, and the spices of India. Originally ruled by the independent kingdom of the Nabataeans, it eventually became a Roman client kingdom and in 106 CE was officially absorbed into the Roman Empire. The native dynasty came to an end, but the city continued to flourish under the Romans until the rise in popularity of sea-based trade routes, which caused a gradual commercial decline as Petra was reliant on land-based trade routes. An earthquake in 551 CE damaged the city, after which significant habitation seems to have ceased, and it fades from the global historical narrative and was lost. I say this with quotations because it was never lost to the locals of the area. At some point, local Bedouin tribes, known as the Bedouin, moved back into the site and repurposed the tombs and caves for their homes. In 1812, Swiss traveler Johann Ludwig Burckhardt rediscovered it, but it didn't really become a major tourist attraction until the 1900s. As the number of tourists increased throughout the last century, the Bedouin began to make most of their income from tourism, serving as guides, renting out their caves, and selling food and beverages. For a time, they also sold archaeological objects found among the ruins, mostly potsherds, but I will warn you, this is now illegal, so if you visit the site and someone tries to sell you an artifact, don't buy it because it's actually probably fake and or could land you in a lot of trouble. In 1985, Petra became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and at this time the Jordanian government moved the Badul to a new purpose-built village named Sehun, which gave them access to better education and healthcare, but decreased their access to their traditional lands and tourism work. Thus, many of them resisted the move and continued to live in caves, rock shelters, and black tents, adhering to their traditional lifestyle. Efforts to move them, however, became more concerted, and by 1990, only a very few tent camps remained in remote locations. A road connecting the site to the village now allows the Badul to continue making a living off of tourism in Petra, and virtually everyone working in the park is from this village. In 2007, Petra was voted one of the 7 new wonders of the world. It has now become a symbol of Jordan, as well as the country's most visited tourist attraction. It has also been the subject of many archaeological projects, which have revealed so much to us about the Nabataeans, the Romans, and other people who've lived there throughout its history. On to today's tour. I want you to take a second and imagine that it's around 6:30 a.m. and the park has just opened. This is the ideal time to start your day there, as there are way less people around at that time in the morning, meaning you get to feel like you have the park almost to yourself, you're not having to battle crowds, and you might be able to get that key photo in front of this treasury just featuring yourself. It also means you have all day to see the park instead of just a few hours. And if you happen to be there in the summer, like I was, it is obviously before the hottest part of the day. So you want to try and get as much of the site out of the way as possible before you start melting into the ground. The entry ticket price depends on if you are staying in Jordan for at least one night or just the day. If you're staying overnight, you can get a 1, 2, or 3-day ticket. If you have the time and money, I would highly advise arriving the day before and staying overnight in the Wadi Musa town. They have lots of hotels available at varying prices. This allows you to get to the site first thing in the morning. Additionally, if you time your visit to happen on a Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday, you should also 100% buy tickets to the Petra by Night show. These cost only 17 JD. It starts at 8:30 p.m. from the park entrance. You are greeted by some guides and you walk along a candlelit path through the Sikh to the Treasury, where local musicians play music as you drink tea and watch the stars. It is a magical experience that I cannot recommend enough. Upon entering the park and at many points throughout the site, you will have an option to ride horses, donkeys, camels, golf carts, or in a carriage. You may have been told that the cost of any of these is included in your ticket, but this isn't really true. No matter what kind of transport you take, you are expected to tip for your ride, and it's a haggle economy. So be prepared for prices to fluctuate, something which applies generally to the whole park. Don't accept the first price offered, even for buying souvenirs. Personally, I would advise trying to do as much of the day on your own 2 feet and save your rides for the end of the day when you are actually tired, even if this means you might be paying a little bit more. Make sure you've got worn-in walking shoes with decent ankle support and a good supply of snacks and water. These are available to purchase within the park, but obviously because they're in the park, they are priced at a premium. In antiquity, it's thought that Petra was primarily approached from the south, on a track leading across the plain. But today, most modern visitors approach from the east via the modern park entrance. On your way down, you will see a few hints of what's to come. Keep an eye out for 3 massive squared monuments carved out of the rock, commonly referred to as jinn blocks. These are actually funerary monuments with graves inside of them. Near the end is the obelisk tomb, named after the famous Egyptian-style pillars it boasts on the roof. It dates to the 1st century CE, and inscriptions tell us it was built for a man named Abdamankos and his family. It is an excellent example of how Nabataeans took and melded the architectural styles of their neighbors. At the top are the Egyptian obelisks, but the lower story is modeled after the Roman banqueting hall called a triclinium. At the end of the modern path is the entrance to the Seek, a dark, narrow gorge 1.2 kilometers long. It is a natural geological feature formed from a deep split in the sandstone and later smoothed by water via flash floods. As we meander through, there are two things worth noting. First are the water channels carved into the sides of the gorge, which collected water for storage in cisterns around the city. Our second thing to spot is this. Can anyone make a guess as to what it is? Well, if you look closely, you can see it's actually a carving of a man leading a camel, a life-size relief celebrating the caravan trade that formed the basis of Nabataean wealth and influence. At the end of the Seek is one of the most famous shots in archaeological cinematic history, Al-Khazna el-Faroun, which translates to the Treasury of the Pharaohs, usually shortened to the Treasury. This name comes from legends regarding the decorative stone urn high on the second level, which the Bedouin once believed contained Pharaoh's treasures. If you look closely, you can see where they shot at it with guns to try and break it open. Unfortunately, as is often the case, these legends were just wishful thinking, and in reality, the urn is solid sandstone. The connection to Egypt comes from a legend that when the Egyptian pharaoh and some of his armies escaped the closing of the Red Sea, he created this monument by magic as a safe place to store his treasury, and then continued on in his pursuit of Moses. In reality, the monument is a royal tomb from the 1st century BCE, and its assumed occupant is King Aretas III or IV. Many of the architectural details have eroded in the past 2,000 years. However, you can still make out that the exterior of the building, the facade, was elaborately carved. The lower story consists of a 6-columned porch with a triangular pediment or roof. The floral column tops along the porch are an adaptation of the classical Greek Corinthian order. Between the outer columns, 2 figures on horseback represent the Greek gods Castor and Pollux. Within the porch, a room opens on either side before the main entrance, which would have been originally fitted with massive wooden doors. The upper story of the facade is a broken pediment interrupted in the middle by a tholos, or rotunda, hosting a goddess. She stands in the front bay of the tholos. Amazons bearing axes decorate the side bays of the tholos and the front and side bays of the broken pediments, while winged victories decorate the rear bays. Eagles, a symbol of the Nabataean god Dushara, crown the pediments. The tholos is topped by the symbolic funerary urn that allegedly contained treasure. You might also have spotted a series of notches carved to the right and left of the facade, a unique feature not seen on any other monuments at this site. Over the years, many people have wondered and tried to come up with explanations for what they were used for. The most widespread theory is that they held scaffolding into place for the construction of the monument, or allowed the original builders to scale up and down. However, this contradicts the building methods we see at other Petran monuments, where construction workers did things the easier way by starting at the top of a monument and carving their way downward to the base. This would have provided a continuous platform to stand on as they worked their way down and would have been much safer than using scaffolding. Another suggestion has been that these notches may have been used to hold a finishing plaster onto the face of the monument. Unfortunately, without a time machine or the discovery of the builder's manual to the Treasury, we probably won't ever be able to say for certain what they were used for. In contrast to the elaborate exterior facade, the interior of the tomb contains a now empty, plain main chamber and 3 antechambers. There's no remains inside of it. That was all looted very long ago. There are no entrances or trapped pathways leading to the Holy Grail, I'm afraid. Trust me, I've checked. However, this doesn't mean there isn't absolutely nothing to be found here. Just out front, archaeologists have found and excavated 3 rock-cut tombs over 6 meters below the present ground level. They were largely intact, containing human bones and other material finds, including typical Nabataean pottery, which corroborates the dating of the tomb facades to the 1st century BCE. These underground chambers may contain the remains of King Aretas' relatives, considering their proximity to his tomb. Hi everyone, it's Editing Rachel here. Brief interruption. I wrote and filmed this video in August, and then I went and had a baby in September. And conveniently, in October, there was a news release about a new discovery at Petra. I don't have time right now to set up and film because of said baby and the fact that I have a cold, so please excuse this brief voiceover interlude as I couldn't leave this part of Petra's story out. Since the discovery of the other tombs I just spoke about, it's been thought that there were always more to be found. Earlier this year, archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar to look at the wider area in front of the Treasury. This is a remote sensing technique that uses radar pulses to detect underground objects, and the results of it revealed anomalies similar to those in the already found tomb from 2003. This was the proof needed to receive permission from the Jordanian government to then dig and verify the results. The new tomb was found in August 2024, and it contained the remains of 12 individuals as well as grave goods made from bronze, iron, and ceramic. Among the artifacts were several vessels, including one that was immediately likened to the Holy Grail from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade by both the press and the TV program that recorded this entire dig. Now, that being said, it does turn out a little while later when I was recording this that this is actually just the top of a broken jug. It's not a cup or a grail at all. So it was perhaps a little bit overstated for the news, but that's fine. The human remains are well preserved enough that it is planned to have them sent for radiocarbon dating, ancient DNA, and stable isotope analysis to try and determine more information about the familial connections and social status of the tomb's occupants. Are these more of Aretus's family? Hopefully we'll be able to find out soon. This discovery was filmed for the TV show Expedition Unknown, which is featured on the Discovery Channel, if you're interested in finding out more and watching it kind of as it happens. Now we're going to return back to our previously filmed content. Now, some people would make the mistake of getting to the Treasury, taking some pictures, and then leaving the park, thinking they'd seen everything there is to see. But not us. Instead, we are going to proceed down the street of Facades into the city proper. This street is named after its row of over 40 monumental tombs carved into the southern cliff face. These are less grand than the royal tombs, but their sheer number is a good indicator of the prosperity of the city at its peak. These tombs represent the nobles of Petra during its heyday. The facades were probably originally covered with stucco and painted in bright colors. This is also where you will come across the first set of toilets and groups of shops. There is some in front of the Treasury, but this is the first big group of them. Buying a trinket to remember your visit is a matter of personal taste, but one of my favorite shops when I visited the site was that of Marguerite van Geldermalsen, a woman from New Zealand who traveled to Petra in 1978, met a local Bedouin man, married him, and lived in his cave at Petra until the new village was built. She had 3 children and wrote a book about her life called Married to a Bedouin. She used to have a stall around this area selling signed copies of her book and local jewelry, but her website says the pandemic forced her family to close the shop and move back to New Zealand. This is very unfortunate, but her book is available to buy on e-readers. So if you want to add even more context to your knowledge of the site, I highly, highly recommend reading it. As we continue walking down the street, just before the theater, you will see some steps to your left. Following these 800-odd steps will eventually lead you to the high place of sacrifice at the top of Jebel Madba mountain. There are many notable sites on the way up to and away from this ridge. I've hiked up there several times with my friends. To get back down, you should take the Wadi Farasah trail, which takes you kind of down along the back. At about halfway down this is the lion monument sculpted into the wall, which is thought to have been used as a water fountain. The winding staircase will then lead you into the garden triclinium, which was used for feasts to honor those who were buried in the nearby Roman soldier tomb. It's also the location of my channel banner image of me sitting on a column. The path then leads to other notable sites, including the Renaissance tomb, Xantar Hill, and Amud Furun, before joining back with the main path, where we will backtrack a little bit to see the theater. Carved into the side of the mountain, the theater consists of 3 areas of seats separated by passageways and accessed via 7 stairways. It was built in the cultural and political apex of the kingdom under Aretas IV. Although Roman in design, it is carved out of the sandstone instead of being built out of stone. This is a distinctly Nabataean characteristic. It could accommodate approximately 8,500 people, and its position facing northeast means that the spectators wouldn't have had to worry about the sun shining in their eyes during a performance, which is something I find to be really thoughtful on behalf of the architects. Above, you can see numerous tomb fronts that were destroyed to make way for the upper tiers of the seating. As we enter the valley and city center, the cliff-faced tombs on our right continue. There are a few that really stand out here due to their size and architectural details: the palace tomb, the urn tomb, the silk tomb, and the Corinthian tomb. These are generally grouped together and referred to as the royal tombs. However, we don't actually know who their occupants were. Recent surveys of the area directly in front of the palace tomb have found many large ruined architectural complexes, retaining walls, and artificial terracing. The area's easily defensible and strategically convenient location overlooking the city center, its self-sufficiency in terms of water supply, and proximity to the so-called palace tomb have led us to think that this might have been part of the royal quarters of Petra, supporting the idea that this set of tombs belonged to the rulers of the city. The palace tombs is one of the largest monuments of Petra. Its name comes from its rich decoration and supposed resemblance to a Roman palace design popularized by Emperor Nero. The facade has 3 stories, the highest of which is notable because it reaches beyond the face of the cliff and is built rather than carved. This is significant as it is one of the only monuments in Petra which is both carved and built. Next, the urn tomb stands out due to its complexity and unique features. Its facade has 2 half columns at the center and 2 rectangular columns on a podium on either side of a doorway. They bear Nabataean capitals and support a weathered entablature whose frieze contains 4 panels with reliefs, probably representing Nabataean deities. Another unique feature is 3 burial niches high up on the facade. In the opening of the middle one, there is still a relief plate on which the bust of a dignitary, possibly a king, can be seen dressed in a tunic. The silk or streaked tomb was named after the iridescent colors of its eroded sandstone facade. The doorway is kind of plain, with a burial niche above it. Lastly, the design of the Corinthian tomb is based on the Treasury. The heavily weathered facade consists of 3 stories, but in contrast to its inspiration, it is asymmetrical, with windows of different sizes to the right, with doors to the left. Now we arrive at the colonnaded street, which was originally built by the Nabataeans and later refurbished during the Roman period. It would have been one of the principal shopping streets, aka the High Street, of ancient Petra. It's very slightly curved instead of flat to allow water to drain into a network of channels that would have been underneath the street level. At the beginning is the Nymphaeum, a semicircular public fountain which got its water from a tank on the opposite side of the valley. The remains of the fountain are shaded by a 450-year-old juniper tree. Near the end of the street, we come to one of the biggest buildings in Petra, the Great Temple. Its outer walls measure 54 by 140 meters, and it is constructed over 2 levels. Stairs lead up from the street to a large colonnaded courtyard, and then a second set lead into an upper terrace with the remains of a columned hall and a small theater. The upper terrace was constructed sometime in the 1st century BCE. On this, a structure was built that was at first thought to be a temple, but after further work now looks to be an assembly hall. A second phase of construction 200 years later, in the 1st century CE, added the lower terrace below the original one with a retaining wall separating the 2 levels. The upper terrace was also remodeled at this time, when the interior of its columned hall was converted into the theater. Despite the name, it is not at all certain that this complex was actually a temple, since temples from this time period don't have theaters inside of them. It has been suggested that the upper terrace may have begun life as a temple and then been remodeled. However, a conversion like this is otherwise unknown in the ancient world, so it doesn't seem likely. It makes more sense that the upper terrace started out as an audience or meeting hall and was then converted into a council chamber with the addition of the theater. The lower terrace, surrounded by its roofed colonnade, would have then been a public forum and space for assemblies and ceremonies. The Great Temple was severely damaged in 300 CE and totally collapsed in the earthquake of 363 CE. At the end of the colonnaded street lies the Triple Roman Gate, which was probably built during the reign of the Roman emperors Trajan or Hadrian. It separates the colonnaded street from the sacred precinct of the city. Just beyond the gate are two actual temples on opposite sides of the street. To the south is the Qasr al-Bint Temple. It measures around 60 by 60 meters, with standing walls 23 meters high. It was built in the 1st century BCE by Obotus III. There are 3 chambers in the central shrine, indicating that there were 3 gods worshipped here. 2 Roman period inscriptions indicate that it was dedicated to the goddess Al-Uzza, the god Baal-Shemin, and an unidentified 3rd god or goddess. The modern name Qasr al-Bint al-Farun means the castle of the daughter of Pharaoh. This relates to the local legend involving the Exodus pharaoh. On the other side of the street is the Temple of the Winged Lions, which dates to King Aretas IV. First noticed in 1897, proper archaeological excavations here began only in 1973, and most of the fieldwork finished in 2005. Among the first findings were fragments of column capitals with winged lions on them, which inspired the building's name. The temple is probably dedicated to the supreme goddess of the Nabataeans, as suggested by an inscription found on an eye beetle reading, "The goddess of," unclear, "son of," unclear. This artifact is one of the most iconic items recovered at Petra. The archaeological work also identified over 2,000 individual stratigraphic layers, each of them corresponding to changes in building use, style, and events related to the preservation and destruction of this building. To the west of the temple is an extensive complex of specialized workshops which functioned as a place of manufacture of marble figurines, iron and bronze items, religious altars, painted ceramics, hooks for hanging meats and poultry, and even luxury items such as oils, perfumes, frankincense, and myrrh. The control of a multitude of goods intended for export and sale would have ensured a degree of financial self-sustainability for the temple. Also found were a variety of small portable souvenir altars, probably used by ancient tourists. Additionally, inscription fragments intended for temple officials show other external sources of revenue brought to the temple in the form of offerings. A recent retranslation of one of these inscriptions lists the donation of gold and silver bullion to the temple, while also voicing a concern that this payment be exclusively used for the needs of the temple, highlighting a possible pre-existing misappropriation of funds of revenue by the priests in the past. Now, as we reach the northwest end of the valley, we're going to take a right to reach our last site for today. Luckily for us, we get to skip, once again, the 800-stair hike you take to reach it. At the end is the monastery at the top of the world, also known as Ad-Dir. The facade of this monument measures 47 by 48 meters. It is massive. It is thought to have been carved in the mid-1st century CE. While at first glance it seems similar to the Treasury, you will notice upon looking closer that it lacks the fine detailing. Contrary to the modern name, it's not a monastery. However, it doesn't seem to be a tomb either. The layout of the inner chamber does not contain any obvious burial niches or chambers. Instead, there is a large central niche accessed by 2 short staircases, similar to those leading up to the cult podium of the Temple of the Winged Lions. Outside are the remains of a colonnade, a possible altar, and a round enclosure. A nearby inscription mentions the Musa of Obadat the god. Musa has been interpreted to refer to a private religious group with a limited number of members. This suggests a connection with the cult of Obotus I, a Nabataean king who was deified by his people after his military successes against the Hasmoneans and Seleucids 150 years before the monastery was constructed. This was our final stop for today, and we've most likely taken up most of the actual day, especially if we go to the high place and into the royal tombs. There are still other sites to be seen here, like the Byzantine church, or you could stop at Little Petra in the Wadi Musa town. You can also take time to visit the alleged tomb of Aaron, Moses' brother, which occupies a nearby mountaintop that is visible from much of Petra. If you're looking for other activities to pair with your stay, I would recommend a visit to Kerak, a stay overnight in Wadi Rum, or taking a few days to relax in the seaside town of Aqaba. All right, everyone, time to host our travels for today. That's everything for this video. Have you been to Petra? Have you started planning your trip now? Are there any important sites that I missed or special memories that you want to share of your visit? Don't forget to comment, like, or subscribe before you leave. If you're feeling extra generous, as I said before, you can give me a super thanks, a Ko-fi donation, or visit my Redbubble shop. Taking a few seconds to support me in any way you can shows the algorithm that people are interested in real archaeology, not just clickbait, not just pseudoscience. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure into the world of archaeology.